Hi, everyone. Good evening. Thank you for joining on time. We'll give it another minute or two and get started. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Early Educator series by Key Education Foundation. I'm Shweta, the Director of Product Development and Government Programs at Key Education Foundation. Today's webinar is part of an effort to generate a conversation about the needs and aspirations of pre-primary teachers in affordable private schools. For many of you that may not know, the Affordable Private School or APS, also called the budget private schools, have seen a tremendous growth over the last decade in India. We are seeing year upon year growth with children and parents and families migrating young children into these schools with over a mushrooming effect with over 3 lakh affordable private schools recorded in India today. While many in the ecosystem are working in providing curriculum, teacher training, and more to affordable private schools, these schools have also faced much criticism in terms of quality and in various debates in the education circle. However, these schools have often been left out or are an afterthought in the definition of education policy. And we find that similarly, the early educator in the affordable private schools is also often slipping through the cracks and is left out of the conversation. Towards shining a light on these early educators in affordable private schools, Key Education Foundation, in collaboration with EkStep Foundation, conducted a small study with about 100 teachers in Karnataka to answer the question of who is the early educator in the affordable private schools, what are her needs, what are her challenges, and what are her aspirations. In today's webinar, we have a very special group of people with who we will delve deeper into understanding early educators in these schools and discuss the way forward in the wake of the NEP and the recently launched NCF as well. We have with us Dr. Venita Kaul, who has decades of experience in the field of early years, holding leadership positions at NCRT, World Bank, CSED, Ambedkar University, and has served in numerous national and state committees advocating for early childhood education. We also have with us Anustup Nayak, who's currently a project director and leads the curriculum and instructional practices team at Central Square Foundation. Anustup comes with a wealth of experience in on-ground practices specific to teacher professional development and applying technology to scale programs towards foundational learning. He's a proud alumnus of Harvard School of Education and Georgia Tech School of Policy. We also have with us Lata Menon. Lata ma'am has worked in the field of child development and education for over 40 years in teaching, research, and management of education programs. She has worked in multiple states and countries in her 25-year journey with UNICEF. And since her retirement in 2015, she continues to support the government of Karnataka as a technical lead in the development of ECE and foundational literacy curricula. We have Rishikesh with us as well. Rishikesh has over 25 years of teaching and research experience, a large part of which has been with Azim Premji University. He has recently worked closely with the Dr. K. Kasturirangan Committee, which wrote the draft National Education Policy in 2019. Subsequently, he has been a member of 2 subcommittees which provide the inputs for implementation of NEP 2020 in schools for higher education and to the government of Karnataka. He is currently a member of the NEP Implementation Task Force for Karnataka and of the Technical Secretariat to the Steering Committee for drafting the National Curriculum Framework. I personally thank each of you for being here and giving importance to this conversation. We will also be launching our study report and the tools used and the resources that were developed through the course of this study as a public good, so that we can continue this conversation with all of you who are in the audience and see how you are able to apply this in your own contexts. As we begin, I would like to also thank EkStep Foundation for their support in enabling this effort. And I especially thank Reshma from Illume, who led the qualitative aspects of the study that was conducted, and Simi Ramani, who showed a high level of commitment in conducting the interviews with the teachers, with school leaders, and in defining the course of the study. A special call out to Deepika Mogli Shetty from EkStep Foundation, who is the Chief of Policy and Partnerships and General Counsel at EkStep. She has over 2 decades of experience in corporate government and the not-for-profit sector, and has been a wonderful mentor to us in the past year and to many other organizations in early childhood education as we chart out the path for ECE in India. And we are very grateful for having Deepika's support and mentorship. We were looking at having Deepika do a welcome address for all of you today and set context, but unfortunately she has to be at another event that she couldn't avoid. But Deepika sent us a little video that she would like us to play for all of you. So we would like to start off by sharing Deepika's thoughts with you before we move on to the keynote address. Just as we begin, a quick note to the audience. We will have multiple opportunities for you to participate, ask questions, and interact with us. You will have a question and answer option on your screen. Please use that generously. Share your thoughts, ask your questions of our guests today, and we'll definitely find time to address it. Yeah. Thank you so much. Welcome again. And let's hear from Deepika's video.
Thank you, Shweta, for this opportunity to participate in this webinar. I know this is one of the many conversations that we're going to be having on early childhood, and particularly focused on the caring adults around the child. And what I mean by caring adults around the child is the teacher, perhaps the Anganwadi worker, the parent, both the father and the mother. So why I talk about this is at EkStep, it's been a journey of making meaning and thinking about what it means to raise the level of conversation of the child, particularly focused on the people around the child. While we have been engaged in a series of other work on education, technology, all of that, a huge component of some of the work that we do is about research and insight. How to view and engage with research and develop and pull out insights which could be used as input for programmatic interventions. And what do I mean by insight? Insight is really just one of those, in a conversation with the people that matter, an aha moment. Sometimes it's something that's in front of your nose, but you don't see it, and then suddenly the light bulb goes on in your head. And with this intent of understanding and listening and developing insights, we engaged in a series of partnerships. And one such partnership resulted in this webinar really happened, which has been about who is the early educator. And that partnership is with you all at KF. And the study that you have engaged with and that we've done together has been about understanding who this person is, who this persona is, and why this matters. From our perspective, our interest is, while there are several components which need to come together in order to achieve what we think is our learning goals and education goals for 2030 as a country, there are several building blocks, and a key component of the building blocks are the people at the center. And building blocks, we talk about teacher capability building, we talk about capacity building, we talk about systemic change, we all talk about that. They all culminate together in habits and behaviors of people on the ground that engage with the child. And to develop an understanding of a deeper understanding, and to remain open to understand people who engage actively with children on a daily basis is is one of the key things that we chose to anchor. And research and insights as a public good is what we want to kind of push out and put out there as much as possible and support initiatives in this regard. Looking at enhancing better understanding, continued understanding, evolving understanding. Because the policies and structures are already in place. NEP talks about early childhood. Of course, WCT has been working on it for many, many years. The curriculum of different states are there, all of that. The National Curriculum Framework, as early as last week, released the foundational stage note for public comments. Those are lots of conversations. But what does all of this mean on the ground is the question. And what does it mean for people from their perspective? And we'd like to sort of remain curious about that for as long as we have to just continuously be curious about that question. Not one solution, not one idea is going to solve for this, but to remain curious and listen and learn and continuously gather insight that will feed programs, feed ideas, feed interventions to support the critical people involved in caring for early childhood and children in the early years for our country is important. And from that perspective, we engage in all conversations, partnerships, field work, hitting the ground. We walked many streets together to do this, and some of it has been very, very enjoyable, some of it hard. But the insights that I walk away with is, and this is something that I just want to list just 2 or 3. These are just some of them, not all of it. One is as much as the level of work involved is rather high, there is a lot of abundance in the ecosystem. Every adult is, the inherent joy in working with children is something you pick up even in the most difficult circumstances. Even with the most overburdened teacher, the most overburdened Anganwadi. It's impossible to miss it. There is an aspiration to do better. Just need a little bit of help in terms of organizing ideas and things, then taking away some pain points. But there is just a lot of good intent to do better. And parents are key allies. They are critical, obviously, given the young age of the children. But at the same time, understanding that each parent, there is no one person of parent, there are multiple persons of parent. There is a striving mother, there is the struggling mother, there is a struggling father, a striving father. Understanding this is critical in terms of how we think of what they can do with children. Simplifying things so that it is easier rather than feeling burdensome is something that kind of jumped out at us just because of how difficult everyday life is, how full it is. There's a tendency to think parents can do more, and they certainly can. But to understand the different types of parents is also an important thing to do. Just as it is difficult, it is important to understand the different types of teachers. So maybe it's about creating programs and supports to serve their needs in the way that it matters to the child. So this is sort of the direction in terms of our thinking and raising the level of conversation that we want to do in this space. And we see this as a continued dialogue. And much learning ahead of us.
Got it. Thank you. I hope listening to the conversation with Deepika, and in most conversations with Deepika, I think we often leave very inspired. And this video was a heartfelt reminder that conversations are essential to unpack our thoughts and ideas as a collective. And as we define the way forward for this space, I think those are an absolute essential. I cannot agree more with Deepika that a people-centric approach, in this case, a teacher-centric approach to problem solving is definitely the way forward. On that note, I would like to move ahead to the first section of this webinar that I have really been looking forward to, which is the keynote address by Dr. Venita Kaul. I invite Dr. Kaul to take the stage and share her thoughts with us. Welcome, Dr. Kaul.
Thank you, Shweta. Am I audible? Yeah. Thank you very much for this opportunity to be here and to be interacting with all of you. We've just had a very interesting and stimulating video from Deepika, which was really focused on the person behind the teacher. And I think that is something, and the person behind the parent as well, because I think that is critical to what the teacher or the parent comes across to the child. So I think that's something very insightful that one needs to keep in mind when we are talking about teacher professional development. I'm very happy to be able to participate in this first event in my entire career when we are talking about the affordable schools sector. It is really something very unique because we've always talked about early childhood education. We've always, in that context, we've always talked about Anganwadi workers, sometimes about teachers, but teachers as a homogeneous group, and largely in the public sector. And I, in my various other activities, other than my mainstream activities, have also interacted with private schools, but they are invariably the high-end or middle-end private schools, middle-level private schools, but have also in the course of our research engaged with a lot of the affordable private sector, and always felt the need that is where we need to really also, at least we must include them. If that's not the only but we need to include them definitely in this. So to this initiative to look at the affordable sector and look at the teachers in the affordable sector, something very, very significant, and I really welcome that. I would just, because Shweta's given me very short time, so I've never given a keynote address in this shorter period. So it will not be a keynote address at all, but just a few thoughts that I would like to share with you. Primarily, I think that we're talking about the NCF, which has just recently come in, and that has given us a context to think and move forward. I think just as the policy was aspirational, even the NCF is aspirational because it has tried to rightly so create a very play-based, very enjoyable learning environment for children. It has emphasized on that. But the entire implementation of that frame, of whatever the NCF has recommended, is dependent upon the teacher. Because unless we have the teacher in place who's able to do all that, who has been enabled to do all that, I don't think that it would really go through. And this is not for this NCF, but that has been there for all NCFs that we've had in the past as well. And that is something that we need to recognize and really address. In all fairness, the NCF has talked about the teachers, talked about what the teachers' professional development should be like, as well as what is the requirement for it. But again, all that is also, given the current context, aspirational. So, and it has talked about the private sector, but as a homogeneous group without really thinking in terms of this large segment, which is really a segment on its own feet, which is addressing a large number of children from underprivileged backgrounds as well. So keeping this in mind, I think that I will just go back a minute since I talk about the teacher and the NCF to our longitudinal research that we had done at Ambedkar University, the India Early Childhood Education Impact Study with the assistance of UNICEF and other organizations and Asar Center, in which two things stood out. When we did a very detailed analysis of what is happening by way of quality in the early childhood education across 3 states, two things stood out statistically, and these were the teacher as a very significant factor and the pedagogy. And the pedagogy, which was the play-based pedagogy. And what stood out very clearly was that the play-based pedagogy is much more significantly more impact, it has a much significantly higher impact on children's school readiness levels as compared to the didactic method of teaching. That is the teacher-centered methods. So, so these two things, I think, are very critical to look at, the teacher and the pedagogy. Now, when we talk about the pedagogy, what is exceptional about this pedagogy is that most of the time, and I think maybe 90% of the time, teachers and even many of us who are engaged in this field have not really experienced this in the schools ourselves. It is not something that we knew, that we had been brought up with, and now we have to just transfer it on to the children. It is something that is very different. And this is something that has to be realized, and that has to be conveyed and kind of institutionalized, which I think is a very big challenge for the system. And in that context, I think that it is, we have to keep in mind that any effort that we do for professional development of the teachers, because as I'm saying, teacher is the key to the entire impact that we are anticipating would be there. And for that, if we have to really ensure that, you know, the teachers are able to do it, then we have to really focus on what are the ways in which we are going to do their trainings, the professional development, how are we going to handhold them, because it is not just simply a question of training them and they'll go to the classrooms and they'll start doing what is being envisaged in the curriculum framework. And there is this whole thing of, when we did our research also, we found that there is something which is known as the intended curriculum, and there is an enacted curriculum, and there is a long distance between the two. So how do we make the intended curriculum the enacted curriculum? I think that is something key that we have to be working towards. And for that, I think it is very important that we, whatever we are able to actually demonstrate, and not only demonstrate, but through actual practice, be able to help we talk about children learning through experiential methods. I think the teachers also need to learn through experiential processes, because that is the only way they'll be able to, because it is so new, not because the teachers are not capable or anything like that, but because it is something that is not familiar even to the parents or to the teachers. So I think it is very important that they go through that experience. And I will just say three things that are important in this context, which I think is research-based, that it is not merely a question of training when we're talking about professional development. Three things. One is educate, enable, and empower. The three aspects that we need to be keeping in mind for teachers. Educate means to give the training, give refresher trainings, give short trainings, but on periodic trainings, but all make them more demonstration-based, more practice-based, more reflective, rather than didactic again, more actually engaging them to experience the joy of the play-based pedagogical methods. Along with that, mentoring. We did, and again, I'm saying more from the basis of research that we did recently, we had done, as in the context of the research that we did, some case studies of good qualitative research of good practices in early childhood education. And consistently what came out in the better ones was that there was a very active mentorship component to them. So having mentors, on-site mentors for the teachers is again very critical to help them, to handhold them to be able to move forward on this pedagogy. And the third thing is second thing is enable. Enable means they must have the environment. I mean, if you're going to have this pedagogy, you must have some materials, you must have some space, you must have, if you are talking about indoor, outdoor activity, there has to be an outdoor space. What we found was that majority of the preschools that we went to and Anganwadis did not have any outdoor space. So, you know, there has to be an enablement through supportive facilities that are needed in order to be able to implement the recommendations of the policy and the framework. And also find some amount of, you know, like one of the major requirements in any good quality early childhood education is some kind of recurrent budget for recurrent expenditure, or for the teachers to be able to get paper, get colors, get, you know, all those kind of things. So all that needs to be thought through and provided. Otherwise, if we don't do that, we don't enable the teacher, then how are we going to expect the teacher to do it? And the third most important is empower the teacher. And for that, again, it goes back to the training, that the training should be also good enough to help the teacher be able to contextualize the curriculum, because each teacher's class is a unique context. That each set of children provide a unique context. And the teacher must be able to have the ability to be able to contextualize and adapt the curriculum, a given curriculum, to the to the children who are with him, the children, the community, the parents. And for that, the teacher needs to have enough understanding of that. So it is a big challenge. And I'm sure discussions like these will help us to move forward to further think of how we can address this challenge. So I'll stop there. Thank you very much, Shweta, again.
Thank you so much, Vinita ma'am. I think, sorry about the short time. I think I'm very keen to hear a lot more stories from your experience, and we can see some questions coming in. So I'll definitely, we will have some time to address that. And I'm hoping we can delve a little deeper into some of these things.
Sure.
I think you definitely hit the nail on the head in terms of, even as an organization, we have often spoken about great training is one part of it, but operational aspects of it, from coaching to enabling the teachers, to helping them situate this in their own space, their own classrooms, come back for doubt clearing, have a community to speak with. These are all parts of professional development, and somehow our understanding of training is probably much narrower. So thank you for kind of painting that wider canvas for us to take this conversation forward. Thank you so much, ma'am, for being there, and do stick around. We'll have our panel very soon in the next couple of minutes as well.
Okay, sure.
So thanks everybody for listening in as well. Please share your questions in the question box. And as we move forward, now with the context that Dr. Kaul has so nicely set for us, in terms of what teachers need, we're going to jump in the next 5 to 7 minutes into understanding what we learned when we spoke to 100 educators. I'm going to invite Namrita, who leads the teacher professional development at EkStep Foundation and led this research, to present our findings as highlights and as a summary to all of you. And I'd engage the audience as well to feel free to ask more questions on any of these insights, and we will be happy to respond to them in the chat. Thank you. Thank you. Over to you, Namrita.
Thank you, Shweta. Hello, a very good evening to all the panelists who are present here today and all the participants who have joined us. I'll now be presenting the highlights of the study, Status of Teacher Professional Development of Early Educators in Affordable Private Schools. As it was mentioned earlier by Shweta also on that a number of studies have shown that children are not performing at par, as shown with some of these numbers that you can see on the slide. Today, we are going to focus on the early educator, since they are the largest contributors and drivers of impact on student learning. But currently in India, what we have seen is there is very little information that's available on the pre-primary teacher in the affordable private schools. And at KEF, we started asking these questions to understand the early educator, and it triggered the genesis of this small but important study. Before we begin, I would like to ask you all a few questions on the early educator. So you're going to get a series of poll questions pop up on your screen. I will read them out as they come up, and you would have about 10 seconds to put in your answers. So the first question, yes, is what is the highest education qualification you think a pre-primary teacher in the APS in India holds? So please put in what you believe is from what you know. And sorry, panelists, you will not be able to vote on it. Okay, we'll wait for 5 more seconds, and then you'll have your second question pop up. Yes. The second question is going to come on your screen now. How many pre-primary teachers in the APS do you think are trained in early childhood care and education? You can take a ballpark guess. Or if you have read through a lot of reports and you already know some insights, you can use them as well. Okay, we'll wait for 5 more seconds. Please put in your responses. Yes. So now you will have our last poll question coming up. According to you, how do pre-primary teachers define personal growth in the profession? I'll read out the options as well. You will have 10 seconds to choose your answer. Getting a higher salary, moving to teaching higher grades, starting a preschool of their own, growth in own knowledge and skills, or you believe that teachers do not see a growth. You may have multiple answers for this, but please pick the one you feel you align or you think is the most popular one. Yes. Okay, if we have enough responses, I think we can close the poll. Okay, thank you everybody for engaging in this. We will be revealing the result of each of these poll answers through this presentation. So let us begin. So coming back to the study. So the study was conducted with three main objectives in mind. The first was to understand where and how early educators access professional development. Second, to understand what is the knowledge that early educators have on developmentally appropriate practices in early education. And lastly, to understand the needs, aspirations, and challenges of early educators in the affordable private schools. This study was conducted in 4 stages. The first was where we conducted a secondary research to evaluate the training options that are available to those seeking to be pre-primary educators. We conducted a teacher survey through telephonic interviews to understand the profile of pre-primary teachers. An online assessment was administered to understand the baseline knowledge that pre-primary teachers have on developmentally appropriate practices in ECE. And finally, a detailed interview was conducted for a focus group of teachers by ILUM to understand the needs, aspirations, and mindsets of pre-primary teachers. Through the study, we reached about 100 plus teachers from across Karnataka, and a majority of the teachers in pre-primary that we interviewed were found to be between 30 to 40 years in their age, with about 5 years of experience teaching pre-primary grades. And when it came to the education qualification, we had asked you, one of the poll questions was around this, on what you believe the highest education qualification could be. So let us see what the results are. Yes, so the results show that many have said teachers hold a graduation degree, and then there is a lot of votes for 12th certificate, 10th, and then the post-graduation. And many have also said that a teacher could have a diploma or a certificate program. So now let us see what we found in our surveys. Here we see that majority of teachers have a graduate degree in some field, which may or may not be related to ECE or education. So most of you were, the highest vote did go for this. There were also some teachers in our sample set who had 12th certificate and some even holding a 10th certificate. So we saw a broad range here. So we can say that teachers have a degree, which shows they value it, but it isn't a mandate when it comes to hiring. We had then asked you one more question in the poll, which was how many pre-primary teachers do you think would be ECE trained? So let us see what the results are. Okay, the large majority has said below 30% teachers are ECE trained, and very less votes for 100%. Above 80% has gotten 8%. At least 50% is said by 40% of the audience here today. So let us see what we found through our survey. So among the 100 teachers that we interviewed, 91% of pre-primary teachers had received some form of ECE training. And when we say ECE training here, this could be a graduation degree, it could mean a certificate program, or it also could mean a training that was led by an NGO. Now, the question remains, what is this training that they are taking and how good is it? So we will answer these questions also in the coming slides. So I'll just move ahead. So coming to the first objective that we wanted to understand on how teachers access professional development, we asked teachers whether they know how or where to find suitable training in EC. And majority of teachers said they did not know how to do this or where to find this. And that their major source of information on training was from the school management that recommended training to them, or they found this out through word of mouth, through their friends, colleagues, or family members. And among the courses that are available to teachers, both teachers and schools prefer credible training programs like the nursery teacher training, or what's also called as NTT commonly, over any other program, which is why in our study, 84% of the teachers who participated had an NTT certificate. Now, when we dug deeper into NTT, when it comes to the quality of NTT that is delivered across different providers, there was no consistency observed in the quality of content and delivery. We ourselves at KEF conducted our own internal research to understand what are the easily available training options that are there for teachers in EC. And we concluded that there is no credible source for teachers to access information on available training options and their quality for ECE. Yes. Now, considering that most teachers we surveyed had received ECE training, we conducted an online assessment to get a sense of what is the knowledge they have on developmentally appropriate practices. So here we found that teachers have a broad sense of the right terminologies when it comes to early childhood education, but they struggle to apply this and articulate at the level of designing classroom experiences. This means that they're able to say that children need play-based and multisensorial activities in the classroom, but they struggle to make a lesson plan that is play-based and age-appropriate. They are able to say that they identify the teaching learning materials are very important in the classroom setting, but they fail to use it effectively in driving learning. This indicates that there will be a gap in implementation of the age-appropriate practices despite the training that they have received. We also compared the assessment results across different types of training programs that teachers have undergone. And we found that irrespective of the experience or the type of training, teachers' performance remained uniform across. This shows that currently none of the training programs were catering to the holistic capacity building of the teachers. Now, we have seen that trainings exist. Teachers are taking up training, but the content and delivery needs to be improved upon. And now as we work with teachers, it is very important for us to understand what are their needs, what are their aspirations and motivations. So since we saw that most of the teachers are trained, we wanted to understand what motivates them. So we asked them, why do they seek training? And these were some of the most mentioned reasons, which I'm going to show on the slide, which is to improve subject knowledge. They felt the need that they need confidence to deal with children that age. They believe that training would help them build their own English language skills, to learn how to make learning aids for their classroom. And most importantly, they associated training with a guaranteed job. Earlier, we had asked you another poll question on how a pre-primary teacher in the APS might be viewing personal growth. So let us look at the results from the audience here today. All right. So most of you have said that teachers view it as moving to teach higher grades, and also that they want to see growth in their own knowledge and skills. Some of you have said that teachers want to get a higher salary. Many of you have said they do not see a growth, and very few of you have said they want to start their own preschool. I think earlier, if you had asked me, even I would have said moving to teach higher grades would be my go-to option as well. But the study showed something else to us. So let me show you what was the most common answers that we got from teachers. Yes. So teachers see growth in themselves when they see growth in their own expertise, is what we found. Their own growth in knowledge and skills is what they valued. They saw growth in themselves as continuing to stay in the profession and growing within their own field in ECE itself, maybe as a coordinator within the school. Some of the teachers did aspire to start out their own preschool or creches. And many of them said that they believe their growth is seen when the school and the community recognizes them professionally by giving them more respect in their status. And there were also teachers who said that they want to move to a bigger or a better school by upskilling themselves. So teachers are aspiring beyond what we think they do. So coming to the last part, so conducting this study was a reminder for us at KEF that considering teachers' motivations and aspirations regularly is something that every organization must embed in their design when they're providing training. And at KEF, we will continue to delve deeper into these areas and keep growing our understanding of the teachers. So with this, I'm going to conclude the presentations. Thank you, everyone. Back to you, Shweta.
Thanks, Namrata, for that quick summary and for leading this effort and all teacher-led efforts at KEF for more than 5 years now. So thank you for that. So folks, I think this is a good time for us to get into the panel discussion where I think the insights presented by Namrata, even though this was a very small, short study with 100 participants conducted as a sprint, it raises some very important questions and gives us a trigger with which we can have a deeper conversation about teachers in all affordable private schools. So on that note, I'd like to invite our 4 panelists, Dr. Kaul, Lata Ma'am, Rishikesh, as well as Anustup, to have a conversation with us over the next 15 to 20 minutes, and we can also address some of the questions from our participants as well. So I'd just like to take a minute to confirm that all our panelists are able to hear us, and great. Yeah, and your videos are on. Fantastic. So I know you all got to see the insights that Namrata presented, almost like a crash course in the last 5-6 minutes. But I think your experiences from the ground and experiences we've had, a lot of the hypotheses got confirmed through this research, and some bits and pieces emerged as new sparks of insight as well. So looking at the most common one that stands out, right? It was quite a shocker for us when we saw a lot of teachers are trained. People are talking about training in the last decade. 90+% of them had gone through training specific to early childhood education. Half of them NGOs, much like us and many others, and a lot of them through certified nursery teacher training programs. But like Namrata said, there's a huge gap between classroom practices, or even not even that, their ability to even tell us what they know at an articulation level. So I'd like to open this up and pose this question. Maybe Lata ma'am, we can start with you on where you see, what are the major gaps that are leading to this as a problem on the ground, in your opinion?
Right. Thank you. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. First of all, thank you very much, Sweta. I think it's like Dr. Kaul mentioned, it's probably the first time in my entire career that I am talking about private schools of any kind. I mean, let alone affordable private schools, because to a large extent, I think my experience says that they are very visible, but invisible to people who work with the government and who work with the establishment. Because as Dr. Kaul said, the tendency is to be really looking at ICDS and others and not really looking at this very large group. My responses, to both the study results as well as to the question that you asked as to what are some of, the impediments to strong teacher support program. I'll begin by saying that I'm quite surprised at the results that you have got about, the number of teachers who are going through teacher education of any kind. Okay, because I'm going to base my responses to a series of workshops that we had as a result of Dr. Kaul's study on the early child education impact study. And we had a series of 4 regional workshops where we had talked about the recommendations that the study has made. And we talked about what, are some of the bottlenecks for implementing those recommendations. And the second is a series of discussions that we held with parents as well as teachers of private schools. And this was a kind of precursor to a position paper that we had done for the government of Karnataka on early childhood education, which is required by the NCRT. Okay, and in this regional meetings that we had, this was in 2017, and the second one was in 2022. We had a lot of administrators as well as teacher educators and as well as teachers from private schools. And I think one of the things that, everybody said now, which is very contrary to the results that you have got, is that there's a very large number of teachers who are managing preschools in affordable private schools who have no training whatsoever. Okay, and this is especially true when we are not talking about the middle level affordable private schools also. We are talking about the really small private schools that dot the rural countryside in any state in the country. And either at the village level or at the block or the panchayat headquarters, and you have a lot of them, and there are a large number of children who are moving into those schools. And as when we talked, you see, one of the recommendations of the study was the professional training of teachers, and many of the administrators and teacher educators did talk about a number of problems that come up and what they think will be the roadblocks. And I'm really looking at these in terms of perceptions. And I'll only talk about 4 major perceptions that I have come across. Now, the first is a widespread perception. This is across the board uh, with the public, with private school management, with everybody, that anybody can teach in a preschool. That you do not require any kind of specific qualifications to actually manage small children, because after all, chote bacche hain, what is it that you really need? Okay, now this seems to be a widespread thing, and a very interesting part that 1 or 2 administrators really pointed out was this is a legacy that I think the country has sort of got or inherited from 1975 when the ICDS first started, because the ICDS is really the program that brought ECE onto the map, and it's increased so rapidly, and people started understanding that there is such a thing as early childhood education. And unfortunately, when the ICDS was looking at its own staffing, it really looked at it as an employment generation program or a form of political patronage. And they also propagated this concept that anybody can do this work. So as a result, what has happened is that 2 of the major employers of early childhood education, the ICDS, as well as this large number of rural affordable uh, preschools in the countryside, they do not require any kind of certification from teachers. And once there is no requirement for you to get into a job, nobody is looking for that kind of training. And of course, this was a point that came through very clearly in 2017, that as a result of this this requirement not being there for getting a job, you do have very few institutions that actually provide this. And when they are providing it, in a way that is easy, that is quick, that's more like a shop that provides a certificate than provides any kind of sensible professional development. And as a result of that, you see, it's not having this requirement is also very good for a lot of much for people who are not qualified. And since your teachers do not see any kind of increment in their salaries, etc., when they are earning, they do not really look for it. And as a result of that, all this leads to a smaller number of institutions that are churning out even courses for this. Regardless of whether it's good or bad, you've just got very few of them. The second point that came through both in that meeting as well as the second meeting that we had with teachers was that there is a general perception that the professional development of teachers is not the responsibility of the teacher, but the responsibility of the employer. Okay. So because of that, there is a tendency for people to undergo training whenever there is a training. And this goes whether it's ICDS schools, whatever schools. You are doing it as a requirement, not as a need. So there is very little of requirement on the teacher to do any kind of self-introspection in terms of what are their needs for training, because this they look upon it as a requirement, and because they look upon this as a requirement of the employer. The second offshoot of this is that employers also look upon it as a requirement. It's not only the teachers who look upon it as a requirement, even employers look upon it as a requirement. And it's good, we can show that teachers are trained, it will bring more children in, we can have slightly higher fees or whatever it is. So they also look at expeditious, things that are more expeditious rather than quick shots, very quick solutions, etc., rather than at something that is for the benefit of the teachers. So that was the second perception that they felt was coming. Now, the third one was a very interesting one, and that came through very clearly in our discussions with the teachers as part of the um, paper that we were writing in 2022. And that is this entire belief across the entire affordable private system that the preschool is a stepping stone for a admission to a good private primary school. So once you are looking at it as a stepping stone for a good private school, there are two offshoots of this. The first is that the focus shifts from teacher competence to curriculum content. I mean, pedagogy, dur ki baat. I mean, that's not the issue. The issue is curriculum content. And so any curriculum developer, who is able to convince the school management that they've got a curriculum that is really good and that will help, the content is really high class and it will help them to get admission into a higher good primary school. People who run these schools are not very sure they get taken in, so the focus then is no longer on what the teacher can do or the pedagogy, but on the content. The second offshoot of this is the tremendous pressure that parents now place and the influence they have on the curriculum content of an affordable private preschool. Because parents are constantly comparing. They compare what is taught in another school. There they are teaching up to 1000. You are only teaching up to 300. If you are not going to be able to teach more, I'm going to take my child out. He's not going to get admission elsewhere. So you need to push. And so again and again, the focus of both the curriculum developer as well as the parent is on curriculum content. So when the shift is there from the focus shifts from teacher competence or teacher's professional growth to the quantum that you put into the curriculum, then everybody's focus is shifting onto the curriculum content rather than teacher development. And so there is, even when the management is looking at what they consider a good school and how they have to improve the quality of their school, they're looking at curriculum content rather than at teacher competence. And the last point, which again is something that the last perception that I've sort of come across now in the last 1 year over and over again, is the idea that government and all administration actually consider that private schools are outside their purview. So the problem with the affordable private schools is preschools is that unlike the affordable private primary schools, is that this is a group of schools that fall neither under the purview of the education department nor under the purview of the women and child development department. And so they are pretty much left, nobody really cares about what they are doing. And if at all people are looking at it, they are looking at it either as a competition or helplessness, that, there's nothing that we can do. And to a large extent, I would say that this is something a lot of, our a lot of influential people run the private schools, a lot of political people run the private schools. So there is a certain amount of happiness at that state of affairs, because nobody wants the private schools to come under the um, focus of any kind of regulation. But the problem with this is they don't get any supervision, but much more sadly, they don't get any support either. So unless you're part of an NGO group, or you are part of a high-end private school, if you're talking about the really small rural school, the teacher is very isolated, because no department thinks that they need any support, nor that they need any supervision. So if they are badly paid, if there are no facilities, if the teaching is rubbish, there is nothing that the teacher really can do, because there is no supervision and there is no support. So these seem to be some of the major perceptual gaps. And I just want to talk about those, which are really leading, which are major roadblocks in terms of how to stand in the way of the professional development of teachers in affordable private schools, preschools.
True. Thank you, Lata ma'am. I think it is that balance between practice and regulation that we have often discussed, and thank you for your insights on that. I would like to jump to, just before we jump, we're running a little over time, but I think this conversation will be quite interesting. So I want to just give everyone a heads up that we'll probably be pushing this till about 6:15, and I hope that's okay with everyone. So with that announcement made, I would like to just extend one of the things, right? I think at a regulation level, we've all spoken about it often, and it's a larger problem and a larger conversation. But Rishikesh, I would love for you to jump in where specifically, like Lata ma'am was talking about the ownership for capacity building placed on the schools. I would like to hear your view on the pros and cons of this, right? We have a lot of school leaders here. Is that in some way an opportunity? How do you see it?
Well, see, the best way forward is to really, have that ownership come in. But I think more importantly, some of the points that Venita ma'am and Lata ma'am have raised in terms of, what is it that we would like to see in this space happening, and as to how does that happen with, let's say, facilitation rather than, some kind of regulation, which we all know more often than not, it kind of comes in as barriers to even some of the good work that would be happening. So I'm very hesitant to say that, yes, I mean, let's bring in regulation and, get things in order, because we know that regulation gets taken to the other extreme, right? And NEP has been very clear that any new regulation or even the existing ones have to be lightened. We need to tighten up a few regulations to ensure that we see what is expected of good schools, but then we have to lighten it. So we will have to really think afresh in terms of, when we are bringing in the private schools, or in fact all schools at this point of time, which are doing early childhood education into the regulatory ambit, we should really think very carefully and don't do the wrong things that has happened in the school education space. So having said that, what I think is important for us to focus is also in terms of what the NCF foundational stage has put out, and then see as to how does a regulatory framework get placed. You did, Sweta, say that it's a 300-page document, but that should not keep people from getting to it, because as those who have read it will see that it's a very engaging document, and the number of pages is because of the kinds of illustrations that are there for teachers to directly relate to the document, right? And so that is the beauty of this foundational stage NCF that's come out. And so I think all of us educators interested in the early childhood education space will have to engage with this 300 pages. One of the core ideas is, as Venita ma'am was saying, the play-based approach, right? Now, the very fact that play is equated to toys and children just playing with it and nothing more is something that we get to see in most early childhood education centers, right? Even as I think Deepika used this lovely word, the caring adults. Now, the caring adults are only bothered about ensuring that the toy that the child is playing with is safe enough. But then what can the caring adult do with the toy, right? The various things that the adult facilitator can do, from stories to, singing to, various kinds of, let's say, creative things that the adult can get the children to be doing with those toys. Now, all these are never seen in most of our early childhood centers. So now, if we are wanting something like that to come about and to be the mainstay of all our early childhood centers, then what is the kind of regulatory framework that we would want to think of? Yeah, so it is from this perspective that we will have to come into thinking of regulation, rather than saying that, okay, let's set things in order, let's put in a set of criteria, let's have these things as a checklist. That will not work. And it is just going to even stop some very good, fabulous stuff that's happening. And as many of us have worked in the ICDS and we've seen the Anganwadis, as Lata ma'am was saying, the Anganwadi teachers today, were recruited long ago, more, from the point of view of providing some employment. But even some of them are such exceptional caring adults. Now, moment you bring in regulation without thinking of, what is the kind of an adult that we require there, but then go with just a certain set of qualifications, it's just going to not really help us move forward or create more wonderful spaces for children. So since we've already moving into the 6 o'clock space, I will stop here. Hopefully we can further discuss this. And as you know, this is a discussion that we can, just continue through midnight. So yeah, I'll take a pause here for that.
Thank you, Rishikesh. And I kind of wish we could also continue it, no? Because I think for the first time, I loved the most refreshing takeaway from me was the NCF is for everybody. No, I think even my own bias often that I hold is, can I take a framework to a school? Can I take a framework to a teacher? But here, what I'm hearing is it's also for the parents. And I think as educators, as people in the ecosystem, the question is, can we unpack this? Can we take it to them? And I completely agree. It has been a fantastic read. I've really enjoyed reading the NCF. And I think one piece from there. So Anustup, actually, as we begin, I want to, I had a conversation with Anustup, so I will go to him on the next, to welcome him to come in on the next piece. So I was reading this piece, and all of you have brought it up beautifully in the earlier section on training going beyond training, right? Like what you were saying. And my favorite paragraph in the NCF was this. So I'm going to quickly read it in the next minute, and I would invite Anustup to share his thoughts. So it said that teaching is an intellectual and ethically demanding profession. Teachers of the foundational stage are required to have particular qualities that enable them to work with young children with care, energy, rigor, patience, and humor. They need resource-rich, motivating environments and continuous opportunities for professional learning and interaction. They must feel a sense of pride in belonging to a well-qualified, close-knit, and vibrant professional group. Now, this seems like it's beautiful when I read about this. I want to be a teacher in an environment that gives me this. And every teacher has the right to growth. And I love that the NCF, like you said, ma'am, it's aspirational, but it calls it out in the most beautiful words. Anustup, on this front, you worked for decades in teacher professional development, engaged with the problem. How do you see at an implementation level, how do you see growth for the early educators in practice?
No, thanks, Shweta. This is very important conversation. And I want to start off with a couple of things. One is the report. I just want to congratulate you for bringing out such a nuanced study. And I was making some notes. Of course, I'll read the report. I think one thing that the report makes very clear is this knowing doing gap, that I think you said that a lot of times teachers know these terminologies, but they don't know how to apply it into actually creating a lesson plan or actually using that in the classroom. So, and that's not only a problem with early childhood. And Venita ma'am, if you speak to her, I mean, given her vast experience, it's not only in early childhood, it's a general problem. I would argue it's a society problem in India. And that is why something like this actually scares me in a funny way. You know, this paragraph, it sets up, as much as I love these kind of aspirational statements, and I think I must congratulate everyone who's worked on the NCF and the NEP, and that includes people like Rishikesh and some of my colleagues as well. But I think we need to be far more specific around what are we setting up the teacher for. And a lot of my experience before coming to my current role working with the public education system has actually been with the affordable private schools when I was working with EkStep for almost a couple of decades. And here's what I call the 40-40-40 problem, that I'm a 40-year-old person. I have a home to manage, and I come into the school, I have 40 yelling, screaming kids. It's 40 degrees centigrade in most parts of India. And in those 40 minutes, I have to achieve these learning outcomes. So I think therein lies the conundrum. I mean, obviously, I'm making light of a very complex issue, but I want to bring forward the basic problem that we have in constructing teacher training. And I would break that into 2 or 3 parts. And I know, like Rishi suggested, that we are getting into the 6 o'clock zone. So I want to leave some time for questions. The first is on the what of teacher training. I think if you look at most parts, and Rishi kind of made a very astute observation that you use a word like play-based pedagogy, but what is underneath that, right? That has very specific components, right? It is not a laissez-faire kind of activity where you're just letting children loose. It's a very specific device. So most teacher training is either vague or broad or both. And what I mean by that is, if I am a teacher, my interest is that when I walk out of this training, will I learn how to build something specific, like, teach children, to build some fine motor skills, or get children to just appreciate the world of print. Now, teaching them reading and writing, but something very, very specific. So if you look at most teacher training programs, they're not very specific, they're very broad. The second problem is there is too much packed into teacher training programs. If you look at even a day of teacher training, it covers a lot of topics, and I've been guilty of that. And all of whatever I'm saying, I am the accused in many of these, and this is what I've learned from my own failures and struggles. And the second part after this what, so if we make the teacher training far more focused on the specific skills that teachers can take into the classroom, we are more likely to succeed. And the second part, I think, Shweta, you mentioned it, Venita ma'am also mentioned, is the how of this teacher training. If you look at the how of teacher training, and I remember a statement made by Dr. Dheer Jingran, who leads Language and Learning Foundation, who some of you know, said it's most teacher training is like pravachan. Pravachan is a Hindi word, which basically means that, somebody just talking to a lot of people about something something generally good, but it's not terribly useful to the rest of the people. So the kind of teacher training which I have seen succeed is the one where it is demonstration of a specific skill, followed by discussion and followed by practice. And if you have these 3 things, there is better chances of just the training succeeding. But as Venita ma'am warned us, training, professional development doesn't mean training. That has to be supplemented with what happens next in the classroom. And that is where I'm going to make a case for what has seemingly worked across context, is that after you create some space for this kind of forum training or workshop, if there is structured pedagogical tools available to the teacher on a daily basis whether it is lesson plans or formative assessment guides, or like Rishi was suggesting, you have all these manipulatives, but some guidance on how to use them on a daily basis, then you have a place where the teacher can go back daily. And the third is coaching. That if you have people, and I've seen some fantastic work that you and your colleagues have done, I've gone to some of the schools, that in situ providing teachers feedback and demonstrations. When you combine all three things, you combine really good training, which has more practice demonstration, combine them with tools that they can use on a daily basis in the classroom, and then blend it with coaching, that's what shows results. And if you look at all the studies, whether it is Tusome in Kenya, or Bridge Academies, or Room to Read in India, and now just a fantastic report has come out from Language and Learning Foundation in their work in Haryana, these three ingredients once put together seeming to work. Now, a lot of my work obviously is in foundational learning, but a lot of that can be adapted for early childhood as well. So I would take a pause here.
Thank you so much, Anustup. A lot of very crisp insights, and completely agree. I think asking all of you what is priority, and I think you've clearly summarized those three building blocks in terms of what our teachers need and what could work. As we, like you all said, I think I'm heartbroken that we're short on time, to be honest, because I have so much to speak with each of you. But there was a very interesting question from the audience that I actually thought we must address today, even before we take anything else. Thank you to each of you. You have been addressing audience questions on the chat as well, so that's been fantastic. But I think Hita asked a question, and I think Venita ma'am, if you want to weigh in, or if any of you would like to also jump in on this. She said, what are the best practices from teacher professional development from the public sector that you think can be implemented in the APS, affordable private school sector? And I thought it's a very interesting way to look at it, because often it's the flip side, right? The aspirations are, let's take private to public. Oh, I want to be like this. But is there something that the public sector has done well? I'd love to hear, Venita ma'am, from your extensive work in the space. Maybe you could start us off.
I think I would not necessarily in the early childhood domain. I mean, what immediately I could recall, not necessarily in the early childhood domain, but one can sort of extrapolate from that. Under the district, and I mean, the very fact that I'm making such a specific and ancient reference to an ancient program like the district primary education program shows that not much is happening around, or that I know of, but which is very unfortunate. But under the district primary education program, there were some very interesting things that were done. Actually, both in the early childhood as well as primary education. One of them was that, I think the key requirement is there has to be some sort of recurrent engagement with the teachers, with somebody who is maybe more experienced, who has actually got hands-on experience and can help handhold and solve problems. Unfortunately, I'm just deviating for a second to say that, unfortunately, in addition to all the problems that everybody has rightly raised, a very major problem is who are the people training the teachers. They themselves don't have that experience. So how can they bring that experience into the classroom for the teachers? So that I think is a major lacuna. But coming back to the good practice that you were saying, they had these monthly meetings with the cluster resource coordinators. So the concept of a cluster resource coordinator was not like what it is today, perhaps, but it was somebody who was an academic coordinator, who was a teacher, who had had several years of teaching, who was actually selected on the basis of the creativity of that person. I mean, they actually did some kind of activities with them, and on the basis of that, judged who was the one who could be a very good communicator, creator, and so on. And this person would come in once a month, and they would actually demonstrate. One of the teachers would. So it was actually within the cluster. They moved from school to school every month by rotation. So that also was something very important, because every school got the chance to show something. And that also was motivation. Otherwise, they work in isolation. So the cluster coordinator would go and organize this meeting. And one teacher from the school would actually do some kind of a demonstration of a class, or actually run a class, and everybody, so people would be sitting around and observing. And after that, there would be a kind of a reflective session on what have you seen. And those sections were sessions, and very interestingly, because a lot of people observe and without any kind of engagement, and feel that now is the time to go back home and think about what we're going to do for lunch. But so they were told in advance that you have to have one positive and one suggestion for improvement. So that, you know, they keep their minds on the demonstration. And then subsequently, after this thing, the class was over, children left. And then the teachers would sit around and everyone would be asked, what are your suggestions? And it was excellent. It was really excellent, because the teachers have so much of wealth of experience which we don't tap. And they come up with so the same thing we employed for Anganwadi trainings in early childhood education later, when I was with NCERT, where we had this kind of a demonstration, come practice, come reflection, and exactly the three things that Anustup talked about. So, and we saw the difference. And the difference was also that we took from practice to theory rather than theory to practice, you know. So I think those were some of the things that can be really incorporated.
If I may just add to what Venita ma'am said, you know, I mean, obviously the two examples, I mean, what happened DPP and the cluster sharing, really something from the school space. Karnataka, for instance, a few years ago, had something called Guru Chetna, which was where teachers could identify the courses that they would want to be engaged in, and then, you know, apply for those online. And then once there was a quorum, those trainings or, you know, those courses were taken as close to the teacher as possible. So if it could be done at the district level or at the block level. So that is a very good example, which kind of Nishta borrows from. So today, the Nishta platform is where public, private, or any educator can go on board, enroll, and take courses. So those are, I think, some good examples. And the line is blurring. And I think with regard to teacher professional development, even NEP suggests that teachers should be looked at as teachers rather than categorizing them as public or private. So maybe some could be those courses offered with a small fee. So I'm sure going forward, diets would be offering courses with a small fee to all teachers, including the private. And EkStep has sponsored your study. EkStep has done a lot of work on the Diksha platform, wherein a lot of resources are available. And I think it's time now to offer a lot of programs by, for instance, I mean, I would love to see Keys Foundation offering, or even anyone who is deeply involved in the education space should be offering various programs, because we have millions of in-service teacher educators who require that kind of a professional development. And as your study showed, though 90% have it, we don't know really what has happened there in programs such as NTT. Very quickly, for instance, Azim Premji University last year started a diploma program for practicing ECE, early childhood educators. And we had very good enrollment in it. It was a hybrid program wherein there was just 1 week of class for each certificate, and across 4 certificates, they could get a diploma in ECE. So these kinds of diplomas, should be, I think, offered by many, many more. I would say that all universities should, and even organizations, such as Keys, KEF, and others should be, getting on to this, so that, as I think one of your questions earlier had asked as to how do you look at the 100,000 early educators that we require, how do we, build the professional capacity? And I think it's only when we all join hands together that be possible. Otherwise, the numbers, the scale that we really have is just too huge. Thanks. Sweta, you're mute.
Sorry. Thank you so much. No, I said there were a lot of questions popping up, but thank you so much. I think, Venita ma'am, however long ago it was done. I think those best practices are just as relevant today. We have seen creating agency and voice for the educator who is in the classroom still gives us the best, most sustainable ideas in terms of what works in other classrooms. So I think thank you for calling that out. And I think Rishikesh, it's really heartening to hear that, you know, I mean, I have seen personally the course in Azim Premji University, and we would love to see how to take that from 30 to 500 teacher trainers in the next year itself. If we are looking at creating 100,000 or more early educators for the workforce, just for the affordable private schools in the next decade, because we are being aspirational, we are being audacious even to say that we're going to achieve universal quality pre-primary education by 2030. We're definitely being positive and optimistic in saying, let's get this done. And I think empowering our early educators is step one and crucial to doing this. So as we close today, I would have loved to get more inputs. If there are any closing thoughts from any of you, I would love to open up the space for the next 2 or 3 minutes, hear from you before we close this panel.
Yeah,
So,
I just wanted to add one more point, perhaps, that, you know, we can learn just again from Karnataka's experience with Nalikali and other programs, that teachers must have a much larger say in what works in the classroom. And you know, when we are developing curriculum, etc., it's always good to have a very large participation of the actual practitioners. And I think that makes a very large difference to their own acceptance and their ownership of the curriculum. And I think, you know, it's time that generally we start looking at the private affordable schools and not just pretend that they are not there. Because if we pretend they are not there, we're looking at we are missing out on a very large group of children.
thank you, Lata ma'am. I think that's one of our largest intentions, and we're definitely going to continue various efforts to bring the spotlight and keep it there as well. So thank you for calling that out. Anustup, any closing thoughts as we...
I just wanted to build on what Lata ma'am said, that we should look at the practitioner as a real person and not as an imagined person. And we should also look at the practice, that what is that person doing on a daily basis. If it is not useful to them in their daily work in the classroom, chances are most teachers, professionals would not want to accept any kind of teacher training. So to root it in that reality of where they are going, what kind of conversations or engagement they're having with their children, with what Venita ma'am said, that the gap between the intended curriculum and the taught curriculum. So it's important to understand what is the taught curriculum. Very often we are very focused on good intentions, but intentions, what is it? The road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Anustup. I think from intention to practice is definitely something all of us are going to have to look at. Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you all of you for engaging with me. And with as we close today, we had over 100 participants engaging live in your panel discussion and with everybody else. So I'm just as excited that there is a large community in the audience today and in a lot of other people who are keen to engage with this issue, talk about teacher professional development, and I hope you will continue doing that. So thank you to each and every one of you. In closing, I would like to just take a minute or two to officially launch our report. The link to the report is going to be available in the chat, and all the methods and tools are linked in this report. It is a public good that is being launched in the public domain, and you are welcome to explore the tools, the methodologies, and use it in your own context. And you can reach out to us if you would like to have a conversation or clarify anything regarding this as well. As I said in the beginning, this is just the beginning. We could have had an hour-long conversation with each of our panelists and guests today. And much like that, we will also be having many more voices brought into this space. We will be hosting further panels with teachers themselves, Anganwadi workers. You will see a video series, blogs, articles coming out specifically with regards to teacher professional development from Key Education Foundation. So subscribe to our mailer, follow us on social media to stay updated on this, and we'll make sure to keep you updated as well. Thank you, each of you. We believe that teachers can change the world and the future for all of our little learners. So we're committed to contributing to the ecosystem, for supporting the teachers. And as we close, I want to share a special thank you to all of the teachers from our schools who are in the audience today. And I hope to hear your thoughts and feedback on this that we can take back to our panelists.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.